Yeah, so to start with, can I formally propose Councillor Hunt as chair of this meeting?
Thank you. That's passed. There are item 2. There are no apologies for absence. Well, we should have formally voted on that. But
no, I think we did.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I didn't see. And then item 3, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 26 October 2023. A proposer.
I'll move those.
I'll second those. For you and me. Thank you. There are no declarations of interest that I'm aware of. And this is, we move on now to the substantive item, which is the consideration of the application. Okay, so first, could we just go around the chamber and everybody introduce themselves, please?
My name is Mark Gardner. I'm the operations manager for the Griffin's Head.
Thank you.
Nikki Lee, I'm the publican at Griffin's Head.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Nikki Lee, I'm the publican at the Griffin's Head.
Good morning. My name's Piers Warren from TLT Solicitors and I represent the applicants here today.
Thank you. Sir?
Morning. My name's Matthew Doan and I'm a neighbour to the Griffin's Head.
My name's Wendy Eyre and I am also a neighbour.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. So, the very first thing will be for the... We've all read the bundle very carefully. We're a little bit late starting because we've only just had sight of this letter. So, can I ask the applicant, please, to make your case?
Thank you very much, Chair. And obviously, first spring day of the year, it feels like it's quite a nice day to come down this way. Punch Taverns have made this application to vary a premises licence that's an existing licence for the land at the back of the pub. So this is separate from the pub itself, and it holds its own premises licence. You'll find the details of the variation, or the variation itself, from page 8 onwards. I never like these licensing forms, they go on too long, but obviously you know them as well as I do and know where to find all the information, so there's no need for me to take you through all of that. But in essence, what we're looking to do is vary the current licence to add live and recorded music to the licence itself, which currently is only for sale of alcohol, and extend that sale of alcohol from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. daily. So that in essence is the application. There's then a number of conditions where we're looking to add, some 11 conditions which are designed and have been designed with officers to manage outdoor live and recorded music events at the premises. You'll also see from the letter from the police there's some additional conditions we've agreed with them. 2 of those relate to effectively risk assessing the events themselves and give the police a veto on 7 days' notice if they feel that any of the events are likely to cause serious crime and or disorder. So there is quite a lot of safety built into this application. And it won't surprise you to hear there was quite a lot of discussion and negotiation with officers prior to the application going in that if you like, formed what we have before you today. The current licence, you'll find at pages 27 to 33, they've been in place, this licence has been in place for a significant period of time, I think it's about 14 years, and you'll know from the Live Music Act 2012 and the recorded music exemption that effectively gifted live and recorded music in that external area in the field from 2014 onwards for events under that particular legislation, which I know frustrates some people in terms of how wide it allows things. I won't therefore take any credit for the fact that I helped with the first draft of it. It was taken out of my hands when it got to all the difficult stuff. It was lovely before we got involved, but in essence, that's what it allows us to do, is effectively have live and recorded music outside. And you'll have seen from the environmental protection representation, and indeed from the comments of the neighbours in 2021 and 2022, that did cause some consternation about how that was used. I will go into details about why that won't be happening again very shortly. But there you go, that's the nub of the application before you. We did have very good liaison with the authorities beforehand. We had significant liaison with the parish council as well, effectively representing residents in the area before the application went in, so they were satisfied with what we were looking to do and happy. So it's always good to have that beforehand, because that did shape the application. You'll see that originally there was going to be an ask for 3,000 people rather than the 1,500 for the 3 events. That was cut down in consultation with the officers who, when we drilled down to it, it was kind of realised that that was going a bit far and beyond, and for the size and scale of what we were looking to do, probably unnecessary. The last complaints, as I've said, were 2021 and 2022. And indeed, you'll be pleased to note that not only did William Langston from the Environmental Protection Officers not make a representation against this, he actually actively wrote to support the application on the basis of the conditions and give you a bit of history, which I thought was very, very useful. And that's at pages 41 and 42. And then the police withdrawal is at pages 43 and 44 with the conditions. So Nikki took on the pub in 2023, opened the doors again on June the 15th or 16th. We're a bit hazy, but around the 15th or 16th there. It's very much a community pub. It plays a large part in Papawick Village and some events that go on there. And most of the activities occur, if you like, within the pub and the grounds of the pub, which is not part of this application, but just so you have a little context. There's a very good food offer. They do help with community events, work with Papawick community to open facilities for tea and coffee and things like that when they're doing litter picks or when they're doing other events around the village. So it's very much become a hub of the village, and I think is very much supported in what it does by the local community. This is for the field at the back, and it's held a license for a long time. It's famous, undoubtedly, for the classic car shows and sports car shows that occur there over the summer very regularly. Spring and summer, usually around 24 shows a year, weather dependent. The maximum's 24, but trying to get cars onto boggy ground is never an easy thing to do, especially people with classic cars. You can imagine they don't like cleaning the mud off, so so actually that number reduces. But it's worth mentioning that because effectively, because the field isn't licensed under planning for a wide range of activities, there is actually a limit to the number of events you can do there a year, which is, I know planning's not part of this, but it's useful to know there are 28 effectively 28 events you can have that are ancillary without having to change the planning on the land, and that's the restriction. So when you look at the number of car shows, there's very few other events one could do as well without cancelling the shows. Now, as I say, some get cancelled by the nature of weather anyway, but in essence, you're looking at a handful of events that could take place there outside of the car shows. 2 of those events are already booked up. One is Papfest, where the area is used for car parking and various other things to help with Papfest, which is village-wide, and the bonfire night activities that go on as well in the village. So, as you can see, we're talking about quite a limited number of events that could take place anyway. I'll come on to how actually a lot of that is almost irrelevant to this application because of the way the Licensing Act works. But in essence, what we're talking about here is the variation of to add 3 larger community events for 1,500 people. Very family-friendly events. Fair rides, face painting. It's all ticketed events. A lot of the people who attend do walk to the event, so it's villagers, or it tends to be friends and families of people who live in or know or associate with the village. Now, you can buy tickets if you live elsewhere, but actually to get to know about it, etc., it's very much sort of village-based or people who associate with the village. There are tickets on sale at the moment, actually, for what would be the limited number of 500 if we had to apply for a temporary event notice. So very sensibly, we've limited that. 30% of the tickets are for children. So that gives you a real feel of how much this is very family-friendly. This is about family units coming. The music styles there are very much tribute acts. So they tend to be backing tapes with a singer. So backing tapes with a singer rather than big bands turning up. So I think Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, Oasis at the moment are the bookings. So that should give you a flavour of where this is being pitched. This isn't, sort of a Metallica concert in a field. This is very much pitched to the families who will attend. So it is quite easy to manage, especially with the backing tape part of it. The first event the one I'm just talking about is the 26th of May, and effectively it'll act as a very good trial for how things work. Sorry, yeah, so I'll yeah, so this is the first event on the 26th of May. There may be some teething problems, but obviously it's a good way to iron those out, but that's when we're looking to do it. And we have engaged with Wendy in particular, but Wendy and Matthew, and you know, perfectly understand their concerns, and Nikki certainly understands where those concerns are coming from, and if you like, the genesis of those, which were the issues with the marquee in 2021 and 2022. You'll recall during COVID, everything got put outside, and then in 2022, I think there was a kind of move by the previous tenant there to use what he'd got from COVID, which was people outside, to try and extend that. There were complaints made, and everyone puts their hands up to that, but there was full engagement with the environmental protection officer, and those events were stopped. And my understanding is there's been no complaints since. And indeed, if you look at the environmental protection statement, he makes that case himself. So we have a license already granted for the field. This isn't a review of that license, so we can't take away things that are already on the license, and there's case law to that effect, which I know your legal officer can advise you on. I can never remember the name of the case. I think it's Brown versus Manchester from 2007. But it's a case which effectively said, amongst other things, a variation to the license is to consider the variation, not to consider the activities already granted. That's for a different meeting if it were needed. And I'm pleased to say I don't think anyone here is saying there's a review
No,
needed.
we are aware of that.
Yeah, okay, great. We're happy to look at the location of the bar, which I know was a concern that was raised. And indeed, you'll have seen in one of the conditions, one of the things we need to provide is a full plan prior to the event. So the bar can be moved as part of that condition anyway, to a location that works for everyone. So these things can be managed as part of the event management planning. And indeed, Nikki is you know, were this committee minded to grant this application, gung-ho to get involved with the safety advisory group and get that process moving. And all those things can be ironed out. You'll see that there's other conditions there about having complaints logs, music management, noise level management, all the things one would expect for, in fact, a larger festival than this, which is very good practice, and I think Nikki should be commended for all of that. So we hope that all of that gives some comfort, obviously, to the residents who are here today. I'm going to commend to you that the licence can be granted as applied for, with the additional conditions from the environmental protection that were in the application itself and the extra conditions from the police. And I think that would be an appropriate and proportionate grant for this variation. That's all I really have to say, apart from some comments in summing up about guidance and policy and that kind of thing. So I'd invite any questions you may have at that point.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
It's not particularly questions, it's more the, is this the time when we can say our bit?
Yes, there is.
Okay, because I think it's, sorry.
You can turn it.
Yeah, it wiggles.
It's
flexible.
It's great that, you know, Piers and Nikki have kind of outlined all of that, and as Piers said, we don't, you know, there are some kind of historical kind of things related to kind of why we're here today.
Okay, well, we'll go into that when you make your statement then. If there are no actual specific questions to what's in the bundle or what we've already heard.
It's more about we hear a lot about the events of the large events, 1,500 people, but not about what feels to us the other events of up to 300 people. And there's a distinction between those two. And I think my interpretation is that there's quite a reference to the other events of 300 people, up to 300 people, which I assume to kind of mean things like the car show at the moment as things stand. But there's no provision for a kind of cap or a limit. We've suddenly, you know, you suddenly have a bar and you've got unlimited events of 300 people, which can suddenly be, well, what does that mean for anybody at any time with a bar within a, you know, 6 foot from our fence. And that's a really big change, which I think needs some restriction and discussion. You know, that is the unlimited and unrestricted nature of those albeit smaller events, but events of 300 people are still big events. And
come with, you know, their own level of noise and disturbance, which can't be, you know, avoided. I think, like Wendy said, you know, we in practice don't have any real concerns or objections to, you know, the application for them to want to have kind of 3 larger, up to 1,500 people events a year, which, with the restrictions and measures that, you know, they're looking to put in place regarding noise control and sound checks, etc., and input from the police regarding any safety concerns. You know, that all seems very well managed, but it's the fact that the other part of the licence change looks to increase the sale or provision of live music and alcohol, changing it from 12 till 9 till 12 till 10. But in regards, that's Monday to Sunday, you know, that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And although, you know, there were, you know, a number of complaints made because matters really got out of hand for a couple of years with the previous landlords, whose, you know, attitude was a lot less professional and very different to the people who ran the place beforehand and since. But there has been a gradual encroachment and increase of, you know, outside disturbance and noise over the last few years, and
Okay.
we had a real problem for 2 years, and this feels like it's, you know, almost opening the door to not unlimited events, but almost unlimited late night noise, and, you know, 300 is a lot of people.
Okay.
And during that time as well, over the last few years, you know, they've had an outside kind of fenced off seating area, which was there, you know, pre-COVID, etc. It's always been there as part of the field. But even that has been, you know, that has increased threefold and comes right up to the border of our property now. So, you know, we literally have people sat 5 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet from the end of our garden where, you know, we cannot enjoy at certain times of the year an outside environment.
Okay, we're
we
starting
find
to
ourselves-
cross over into, it doesn't really
It
matter.
does cross over a bit, but
Everybody will get
there
their
is a
say
large-
if you're okay with this. I would just like to invite you to come back on the 2 comments about up to 300 people and that there's a distinct difference, and the unlimited events, because you did already allude to those.
Yes, and-
So for clarification, please.
Yes, of course. And if I may interpret one other question from what was said as well. So the fence area is part of the pub licence. Sure. Yeah, so that's separate from this, but obviously the point is taken in relation to the pub. But
That we're just dealing with what's in front of us today. We can't touch on that. But I take your point. Okay, thank you.
So the issue of the events, I think, is there's a couple of things to say. First of all, the licence for the field has been there for a long time, and sort of very pleased to hear that obviously beforehand landlords were very good and didn't have any issues, and after this period of 2021-22, again, things have been better. So it does demonstrate one can have this licence there without any problems or concerns at all, and that is about management and about a landlord doing the right thing. If someone were to put unlimited music events on that field, you can bet your bottom dollar it wouldn't just be obviously, sort of Wendy and Matthew complaining. We would expect fully to be back here on a review of the licence and have that restricted. But as I said in my submissions, that is all part of the current licence. Now, yes, we are adding the hour on. We're asking for the hour on. And it's for this committee to determine whether 2,200 hours is considered late for what's being applied for or not. The environmental protection officer has given his view on it, as have the police. So I will commend on that. In terms of the number of events, that was the reason I mentioned the planning. And you'll see in our letter, there is no intention of having a marquee with lots of music events. That was very much a landlord who used the relaxation of restrictions during COVID to survive, frankly, and then used it for the following year where he shouldn't. And when there were complaints, that got stopped and nixed, and that's not come back again. So if there is some comfort there, when I'm not asking you to restrict what is already there, because actually I think history can show that it's fine. When you've got good operators, it's more we have to deal with what this variation is going forward. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So now, if you've made all your, you will get your chance to make your representations. But if you've got a specific question, then please do ask it.
Specifically relating to what Piers has just said, he said that the fenced area is part of the premise licence, but that's not what it shows on here. Because the fenced area is the beer garden. And you can see the red.
We talked about this earlier. Craig, would you care to answer that, please?
Yeah, I think you're right. I
overlap.
think both of you are correct. So the pub itself has its own licence, which obviously the car park and then the side fence of your property abuts up to. But then this application is for the field, which your rear fence abuts up to, which I believe is the position. So yeah, obviously when these events are taking place on the field, they are up against your back fence, potentially, is what I understand that you're saying. So yeah, I think both licences abut up to your property. I think what Piers has said is that the current pub licence is up to your fence on the side, which is correct. But then this licensed area also abuts up to the back of your property. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the position.
I totally accept that position, and apologies if that wasn't clear. I thought we sort of thought we were talking about the extension of the garden area of the pub, but no, we fully accept that where the bar area is, it was something we were going to look at anyway in terms of whether that could be moved to assist. And then there is that small bit that abuts at the back there. Yes.
Can I check for my own?
Yes, please
About the seats themselves. Is it the seats themselves, the placing of them close to your boundary fence on both the pub's premises and the proposed field premises? That do you need? You might need, I'm not going to be checking this, that if it's the pubs, unless the licensee will decide to move some of the tables themselves, you might have to bring in a separate power to get those moved.
Sorry, we can work in terms of moving some
You
of
can
those benches
move-
away if
you
it's,
can look
if it's
at
an
them.
issue.
I think what I was just, my understanding of what Piers said was more nothing to do with our fence. It was about the fence that goes around the pub, no, the fenced off area to separate the beer garden from the rest of the field. That's the fence I thought you were referring to, which is shown on this plan, and that's the bit that has kind of, because of the marquee that's up at the moment, then the beer garden has moved into the field and has gradually got bigger and bigger, which is what Matt was referring to as the kind of creep. But I think that's the fence I thought Piers was referring to. So if I'm wrong about that, and he was referring to the fence and the border between the pub property and our property, then my mistake, but I thought he was referring to the beer garden fence that separates it.
It's a side issue, but we'll discuss that.
Okay.
We'll go back into discuss the entire
Okay.
application. Does Councillor Smith, do you have any further questions?
Yeah, can I just have a clarification from Craig, please? Obviously, there's two parts to this application. One is the music side of it, the 3 events per year. But we just want to talk about the extension from 9 till 10 p.m. At the moment, I assume when it's a small event, you don't have a temporary bar outside. No. So if anybody wants to take a drink onto the field, they're entitled to do that, or are they, Craig?
I don't have the licence for the Griffin's Head in front of me. Assuming that it's got off sales included on that licence, then yes, they could go into the pub, purchase a pint, take it onto the field.
So effectively, we're asking, the change is to be able to, is actually to have a bar, a physical bar,
Yeah.
Up till 10 o'clock. At the moment, people can still probably take a drink out onto the field until 10 o'clock anyway.
Yeah, there's nothing preventing
Yeah, in theory. I mean, Nikki manages things sort of quite rigorously, especially during the car events, in terms of where people can go. And indeed, I think one of the things, just so we're very clear about it, there were seats put out before Nikki's time into the field as like an extension of the garden. She's brought those chairs back in to the garden. But you're absolutely right. Consumption's not a licensable activity. So people could take drinks into the field, as happens at lots of pubs, sort of in nice countryside areas. But we are talking about, there is a license to sell alcohol in the field anyway. We just want to extend that out by 1 hour and then have the live music, recorded music, which allows us then to go over the 500 limit under the Live Music Act.
Yeah, so it's no consolation actually for Matthew and Wendy. But it's really just the setting up of a physical bar in the field for an extra hour is possibly the issue, but it's not happening currently. That doesn't mean to say they couldn't anyway in the future.
I think it's a very fair point, but it's also worth pointing out Nikki's tried very hard to be very transparent about what her intentions are to make sure everyone understands. Because, legally, as you'll know, I could advise on all kinds of things like Live Music Act and all that kind of thing, and consumption outside, and we could limit the application so it doesn't look quite like what it is. But we've been very clear about this, and Punch and Nikki have been very clear about this. It's got to be done the right way. It's got to be open and transparent. We want to make sure everyone understands what we're looking to do.
I've got a question, and although it doesn't relate directly to this part of it, you did raise the Griffin's Head licence. So are there any plans at the moment to remove the marquee?
Not at the moment, no.
Not at the moment. Okay, thank you.
So do you have planning permission for that, or do you require planning permission? Okay.
There was a very long discussion with the planning officers, as you can imagine, about the use of the field and the marquee in the field. And in fact, whatever we could put on the field, a number of days you could have, but it wasn't raised about the marquee within the grounds of the pub, which is a different...
Two separate?
Because it's totally separate,
Okay.
and actually the pub has got planning for something different, so its planning allows it to do things like that, which is different from the field.
We're talking about creep.
Yes, no,
Yes,
I
there's
appreciate
two
that.
separate things, but I think it's, no, I'll leave it there. Okay.
I suspect that there would be a lot more concern about a planning application to allow the field to become effectively a hospitality site 365 days of the year, and everyone would have the right to obviously express their views then.
Councillor Palin, have you any further questions?
I haven't. I think the most important thing that you've talked about is that your willingness to consider location of the bar and everything else for each event, which may allay quite a lot of your fears. So thank you.
Okay. Right, so now it's your turn now. Sorry, unless Councillor Smith has anything further he
No,
wants to ask.
I am going to make a declaration of interest, if you don't mind, at this point. I've realised I should have done earlier.
Naughty.
I am a member of the Camera Investment Club, Campaign for Real Ale, who has shares in Punch Taverns, I think.
You think?
You think?
Punch is privately owned, so I'm not sure there would be
Well,
shares.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you, and I'm not going to raise any objections.
Okay, but, well, these might. These might. So can I ask our own legal team, please, to clarify that, Craig?
Thank you for bringing it up, Councillor Smith. I don't believe there is any conflict in you making your decision today. So I'm quite happy that you are able to remain on the panel and vote on any motions.
You're right, it's probably applied if you haven't.
Okay, I'm glad we cleared that one up. Okay, would you care to make your statement, please?
First, I'd just like to...
Sorry, move the mic to you.
So,
Thank you.
first, just following up on your question about the marquee. When, and just for a point of clarity, because
In that it's not strictly in the papers, but I thought I would bring it up because it was brought up here. But as far as this bit now is concerned, this is about the application. So that if you want to make representations about that at a further date to the council, then please do.
well, I think it relates to the
General discussion.
the licence and the general discussion, because because the previous landlord confirmed to me that he required to apply for temporary event notices for events in the marquee extension, and I'm just wondering what it is relevant as to whether that's part of the pub licence bit or the field licence bit, and the provision of the music and the recording, which is what they need to apply for a TENS notice for within the marquee. So we've got kind of three different things going on, it seems to me. So I just wanted to be clear that this application for the music and etc. in the field still doesn't, you'd still need to apply for separate, if you wanted to have parties or whatever in the marquee, you still couldn't do that without applying for separate TENS notice.
Yeah, of course, and again, I'm sure peers will also like to input. My understanding is the marquee is on the land of the pub. This application is just for the field, so anything that's granted today is just the field, which is already licensed. It's that extension of the hour, it's the live music, recorded music. So that marquee is subject to the Griffin's Head's licence, which I say I haven't got a copy of that in front of me today, but subject to whatever conditions are on that licence, it's likely that it would need a temporary events notice to hold an event within that marquee. So it would be separate to this licence. This is just the field. That marquee, yes, would be subject to requiring a licence if it's not covered by what's already on the pub's licence.
Thank you. So maybe we just have a separate point discussion outside of this just to get clarity on that, 'cause I think it is a bit confused.
And to be fair, I don't have a copy of that licence with me either. But if that's what, and certainly I can advise, and we can talk about that outside of this.
I
But
think
if
there's a
there
limit
is
of
required,
20 a year
21,
on there.
15 events, 21 temporary event, 21
Yeah.
days over 15 events.
Yeah.
for
Okay,
temporary
we'll leave that
events.
for outside then.
But I was
Do you have your statement?
I think that we've kind of, I think, covered off our main points. The large events, as Matt said, there isn't an issue with having
Yes,
the large event.
understood.
It is the multiple, and this all seems so reliant on the goodwill and the community mindedness of Nikki and team at the moment. And as we've seen over the period of time that we've lived there, we've had the good, the bad, and the ugly of management teams. And when it's the ugly side, it's caused us a lot of distress and problems that we've tried to deal with, by talking to the previous management team. And it's just got really out of hand. And so I think it is about the bar location as well, and appreciate we can have a discussion about that. But again, once it's kind of locked down and shown on a plan that then becomes part of that official application or license or whatever, it's kind of that the bar could be there and it's shown there and it's shown on a plan there, and that then you know, if Nicky's not around next year, then who knows what happens next? And it's this creep, this gradual creep that we've seen. So I think that, unless Matt wants to add anything else, I think we've kind of covered off. I understand that Nicky's intentions is about the continuity of the car shows and the support for the bonfire and the festivals, and that's always been kind of part of the kind of village kind of heartbeat kind of thing. But yeah, I can't. I'm just repeating myself, but it is.
Yeah, but it's also with the licence application where it stated about there being a change of licensing and from 12 till 10 o'clock, Monday to Sunday. I mean, excuse me for if I've misread at all, but I didn't see anywhere in any of the application any mention of it being restricted to 28 times a year. You know, we're left with the impression that that could have been 365 days a year. And that alongside, and I know we talk about complaints from 21, 22, etc., but, you know, that doesn't say there's not been a lot of noise on other occasions. But we're not ones to complain at everything. You know, we accept where we live, and we know we're not living next to a church that's only open on a Sunday morning. But there are a lot of, especially during, you know, the lighter months and the longer evenings and the nighter nights, there is a lot of encroachment of noise from all three areas, from the field, from the beer garden, and from the pub. And to see that, you know, it felt like quite a general application, like I say, without it being stated anywhere, about it being only for 28 days a year, of which 24 are taken up by the car show, leaving 3 or 4 for, you know, larger events up to 1,500, would pretty much fill that quota. So yeah, you know, obviously I missed that somewhere. And like I say, the concerns that were raised immediately by the placement of where the bar was going to be, when it was such a large area, why a bar, and, you know, obviously the crowds that come with it, especially for 1,500 people, and toilet facilities, or the parking, etc. Because even for small events such as the car show, where, you know, I don't know how many people would turn up to that event usually. It's usually a good few hundred, I would have thought. So obviously there's no discussion of how, you know, how it will be monitored that it is 300 people, not 450 or 500, because it's a lot of decibels. And I know outdoor events and live music, I get the impression there are no kind of limits for noise, etc. It's down to the monitoring and what levels are set. But it just felt that, you know, 300 people is a fair number, and even just general discussion, never mind, you know, merrymaking, can make a lot of noise, which, you know, we have felt a real impact from. And with, you know, like I say, we felt that, and as we have seen in the past, you know, that could go on for 3 or 4 days a week, if it's, which it has done, which, you know, has a repetitive, constant kind of effect on our life, really. And especially, and I know, obviously, it's a different discussion, etc. I would have, and I know the classed as separate licenses now, so I did want to talk about the marquee, etc. I know that's obviously the pub licence, not the field. But, you know, that has caused a large build-up of general noise over longer periods of the year. And so as a whole picture, it's quite daunting what was proposed in respect of it, you know, it could have been any night or every night of the week. And I know it's mentioned about the car show. There's been a, you know, particular point that, you know, we've always enjoyed, and it's gone on for a good number of years, which, you know, is a great event, etc. But it is nice to hear that there is actually, you know, that is limited to the use of the field in that sense, is limited to 28 days a year, which, you know, I wasn't aware of up until this point. I didn't see it in
That's
any of
my
the
understanding, and I've got a question here. So, yeah, that's absolutely the max, is it? The 28 plus the 3, is it? Or does that include the 3?
28 days is the planning restriction on use for activities that are ancillary to the granted planning use. That was extended over...
Oh, this is sounding a bit
I know.
lawyerish.
Well, I know, and to make it more complicated, it was doubled during the COVID period
Yes,
under
I know
the Business
that.
and Planning Act. But yeah, but planning obviously is very separate to this, which is why it's not been raised in this application.
Yes.
But as you'll be aware, planning requires a whole process, and letters get sent to everyone. You would have full say if someone tried to amend that planning usage to allow for larger use of the area. But that's why it's not been mentioned in the papers, because it is separate to licensing.
So is this restricted to 28?
We've not restricted the premises licence because, as I'm saying,
We're talking about the field today, the field licence.
And the field is already licensed for 365 days of the year. So we're not looking to restrict what's already there. We're looking for something separate. So, if you like, that's where we are. And I know it's frustrating and confusing for everyone, but they are two separate regimes.
Right, so if,
and the licence is already granted for use.
And so if you wanted to, you could have events of less than 300 people every day of the week, 365 days of the year.
Under the premises licence, and people have been able to do that since it was granted in 2010.
Yeah. Just to be clear,
but just
that
to be
we're not middled
clear.
up and we think it's only 28. It was just a bit of a red herring.
No. So the licensing, the licence doesn't prevent that. The planning prevents it, and we'd need to get an amendment of planning. The planning officer has already made it very clear that he knows what the 28-day limit is, and that will not be extended without us going through a full planning permission.
Okay, thank you. Does that help? Well, with clarification.
I think in terms of, it's like, the licence doesn't prevent events 365 days a year, but the planning stipulates that you can only have 28 events a year, and therefore you can't have more than 28 events a year. So that, as Matt said, that's new news. Okay. And events meaning anything, whether it's kind of a 10 people, or I don't know, or 1,500 people.
Yeah. Okay, Craig, would you like to return to this?
Yeah, just to touch on that. So, as members will be aware, this is another clear example of planning and licensing being completely separate regimes. Until the legislation is changed, they will remain that way. So, the license, as has already been said, the license allows for the licensable activities to be carried out every day of the year. However, the planning restrictions restrict the use of that land to 28 days. If there were 29 events, then that would be a breach of planning control and would be looked at through planning enforcement and things like that. So it's not something that you could take action against the licence for, but there is a completely separate regime under the planning powers that planning would look to get involved at and look at whatever enforcement action is available to them under their powers.
So can I try and seek some clarification? So the seating beyond the pub premises is only available for the events and couldn't be part of the encroachment for when people buy their alcohol in the pub and then take it out, can't find a seat in the smaller area of the pub's premises, but there are seats beyond the boundary.
It gets difficult there. So this is the separate, that would be an off sale from the pub, which isn't captured by this licence. So, the pub's landlord perhaps might want to manage that, but it wouldn't be a breach of, it wouldn't be use of this licence. The sale of alcohol would have to take place on the field to trigger this
A
licence.
separate complaint if it was happening regularly.
Yes, and there are no, just to be clear, there are no seats on the field that are used, if you like, for overspill for the garden on a regular basis. But yeah, there are seats outside, but and this is where it gets all very confusing. And there was a lot of seating put out there, my understanding is, previously, and that's been brought back. Yes, yeah.
If we are talking about the same area, then there is no seating that has been brought back. It's still extensively seated. And on this sheet it's shown, but within the border, but on this application, well, sorry, not this application, but on this sheet diagram, there's no mention of it. It's basically where the stage is. So it's kind of,
But there is a kind of what we would describe as the beer garden. So you,
which is the kind of fenced off area with the seated benches on
Yeah,
grass,
on the
not in the car
grass,
park.
Yeah, and then there's a little fence to kind of separate it off from the rest of the bigger field. Yeah, so but I would call that a beer garden because it's got. Yes, it's just because that's shown on. I thought that was the beer garden for the pub. Yeah.
I mean,
So,
if you'd allow me
beer
to-
gardens
Will I be allowed
create
to-
a grey area in that you don't necessarily have to have your beer garden licensed. It comes down to the consumption of alcohol isn't a licensable activity. So as long as the point of sale takes place within the pub, the use of a beer garden to consume that alcohol isn't licensable. But what I don't know is if there's some overlap on the licence plans in that, Abby, you haven't got the Griffin's Head licence, have you? Can I?
If there's a discussion that needs to be had about the Griffin's Head licence and where the tables are, that's absolutely fine, and we can have a discussion with that. There is a fenced-off area within the pub area outside of this licence application that might look like it's part of the fenced-off area that is part of this application that actually is part of the pub, but it's got its own fence around it. So, so there's a lot of confusion, but I think I'm just very wary we're all sort of getting off track from the field, and if there are issues about the pub licence and the marquee and the garden and use, we can discuss those. But as your legal advisor has already made the point, pub gardens is a very grey area. It was made more of a grey area by a former colleague and friend of mine in the guidance, which didn't help in terms of whether you had to show gardens or not. But for the purposes of this application, we're licensing a field for music and entertainment and to have a bar in it. Pub, and that has a fence around it, yes.
Yes. So we've been really careful to not step into those 28 days. So that the fenced area, as far as I understand, and the council came round and checked it all with a walkie thing, is within the pub grounds and isn't within the 28 days of using the field. So more than happy to move some of those further up, but those bits in that fence come under, and if I come under the pub, and the field is the other side of that fence. But I can't explain that on that picture because there's no line.
It's not there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this diagram's just a bit misleading because and
So
Beyond the post and rail
Yes.
fence is the
Is the
field,
field.
Yes.
and
This
the
is the
Virgin.
beer garden.
yes, and as I say, I had the council and everything come down and check that.
Sorry, Chair, if I may then.
That's quite all right.
Yeah, so, it's a completely separate issue to what's in front of us today. There may be some overspill onto the field, but if that is as the beer garden for the pub, grey area in terms of licensing, I agree. I don't believe it would trigger one of the 28 days. If the use of that beer garden is creating a noise nuisance, then there's the environmental health officers got powers, to investigate and to address any sort of antisocial behaviour, noise nuisance coming from that area. So yeah, I believe, said many times today, but a bit of a red herring and not part of this application.
Councillor Smith.
Yes,
please.
and again, we aren't discussing this, but it's worth mentioning to Wendy and Matthew. You've heard that 28 days is the maximum for events. The only people who could possibly monitor that are people who live nearby. So please report it to the enforcement officer if you feel they've encroached on that. And also, again, it's not part of this. The marquee. Have you mentioned this to the Gedling Planning Enforcement Officer? Your concerns. If not, let's talk about that outside of the meeting. Because it's either been done correctly or it's not. Away from this.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank
Okay,
you.
so summing up before we retire, and can we confine ourselves to the two issues, please? The extension of the hours and the music, unless you have something to do, Marge?
No, I think my concerns were about the noise nuisance and your discussion or statements about being willing to move seats away from your property, things like that. I don't think they need conditioning. I think they need your acknowledging that there may be an issue, and that's part of what you will need to do for your plans.
Okay, Mr. Warren, would you care to sum up, please?
Councillor, I think to do things officially, I think the residents get the chance to sum up first under the...
Oh, sorry, I thought I'd already asked you and you'd said you were repeating yourself. My mistake?
I think we've raised or addressed
I had thought
our
so.
concerns throughout. We don't feel the need to, sum up as such.
Okay.
I think,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
It's your go.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always wary to make sure that the rules are followed properly. So this is the application for the field. We've talked about that. It's for, in the round, this is an application for 3 events and for an hour extension on licensable activity, well, sale of alcohol, and then the other licensable activities follow. If this committee were minded, there would be no objection from this side to you restricting the extension of hours for licensable activities to Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays preceding Bank Holiday Mondays. So the activities would cease at 9 o'clock during the weekdays and then have the 10 o'clock Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays preceding Bank Holiday Mondays. That is when it's intended to use these events, so hopefully that will give some comfort. That obviously does not include anything to do with the pub garden, which can stay open as to the hours on the pub garden licence. The fact that the Environmental Protection Officer took time to write in support of the application, given the discussions we had and the agreement with the police, I'm going to ask you to give significant weight when it comes to determining this matter. I'll ask you to take consideration of paragraph 1.3 of your own policy that states the Council welcomes the diversity of leisure and entertainment opportunities available locally and recognises that the licensed leisure and entertainment industry brings cultural and financial benefits to the area. That's important for this. You've heard how this is a very community-minded pub and these are community-minded events. I was very pleased to hear that there's no concern with holding 3, if you like, larger events for the benefit of the community. And of course, if there are issues, there are various other statutory bodies that can come in and various other ways these things can be managed. And ultimately, if we don't do what we say we're going to do, the licence can be reviewed. This licence can be reviewed. Paragraph 9.12, 9.12 of the guidance makes the point that each responsible authority is the expert in their field. So that marries with the point I was making earlier. And then the only other paragraph of the guidance that I would refer to is paragraph 9.43, where your determination must be evidence-based and justified as being appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. And that's at page 81 for your legal advisor if he needs to comment on the guidance. The reason I mentioned that is there is a long-standing licence here where the majority of time of that licence has caused no issues whatsoever to residents. And we understand that residents don't complain at everything, and that's always nice to hear that there is that community spirit, and dialogue will always continue with residents here. And you know, Nikki's here, you know, to run a fantastic pub, not just for a couple of quid today or tomorrow, but you know, sort of for the long haul. And Punch will support, you know, her operation of the pub. And if someone comes in after that, they have to abide by the conditions. We'll understand the history in the past and where it went wrong before and where it went right. So effectively, I'm going to ask you, please, to consider that you can't reduce what's already on the licence under the case law. And when we look at what we've got here, I think we have a good case that's a good application that's appropriate and proportionate to what it wants to achieve for the benefit of the community. And the conditions, it's also worth noting, would apply to any other event in the field anyway. So there's some that apply specifically to the large events, but there are others, like you have to do new noise checks, you have to keep the complaints log, etc., that would apply across any event in the field. So there is added protection actually there within the conditions that are offered. So I'm going to ask you please to grant the application on the basis of it as presented, but you can take into account a reduction in hours, as I say, obviously, as I've set out.
Thank you, Mr. Warne. We will retire. Okay, so we've come to a decision regarding the application to vary the premises licence for the land at the rear of the Griffin's Head. We are minded to grant the application subject to all the conditions enclosed within the papers, including the offer of only extending the time till 10 p.m. on a Friday and a Saturday, and only the Sunday that precedes bank holiday, so not on school nights. And that music should be to match those conditions, so not music on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. You're encouraged to report any breaches of the licensing conditions. There are mechanisms in place to review the licence and breach of conditions and noise complaint processes and the police for public disorder should you should the need arise. Let's hope that it's not. It's been quite a civilised hearing, and thank you all for coming. Cheers.